Hello and welcome to La Excellence Hyderabad and Bengaluru. This is the daily news analysis for 7th May 2020. Before we move into the discussion, I have a small announcement to make. La Excellence is launching the GS Prelims cum Mains course for the 2021 batch and it will commence from 7th May 2020. Please call or send an SMS or WhatsApp on the number given here for further information. Now let's move on to our discussion. As usual, the daily news discussion is divided into two parts, which is the deep and the targeted news analysis. The editorial articles are clubbed under deep and the rest of the important articles shall be discussed under the targeted news analysis. So the title for the first article of our discussion is Resuscitating Multilateralism with India's Help. The syllabus connection has been listed here for your benefit. The issue is related to the concept of multilateralism and the dimension we are going to discuss is the role for India in reforming multilateralism. So what does the article say? This article talks about the downfall of multilateralism that we are witnessing at the moment. If you look at the multilateral organizations, be it the WTO, be it the World Bank, they are not functioning well. Partly they are not functioning well because of the systemic inefficiencies present in those bodies and partly because the whole world is presently going through a hyper-nationalistic tendency. In a manner of speaking, what is happening is different countries in the world are trying to close their borders. They are trying to be close-minded instead of cooperating with each other. In such a situation, multilateralism is the only way forward. We have to open our minds to different nations and different thoughts in order to come up with solutions to handle the COVID pandemic. Like for example, if different countries try to find the vaccine for COVID-19 in silos or in isolation, they might take a lot of time. But instead of doing that, if they cooperate, it might be possible to come up with a vaccine very fast. That is one answer to the COVID pandemic, which can be solved with the help of multilateralism. In addition to this, multilateralism is also going to be important in order to handle the economic recession. As we all know, COVID pandemic has basically shut down all the economies for all practical purposes. There are lockdown restrictions, there is no transport or logistics, there is no farming, no harvesting and no nothing. Because of all these reasons, once this COVID pandemic dissipates, there is going to arise a situation of recession. There is going to arise a situation of contraction of economy. In such a situation, it is really important for economies to cooperate with each other to handle the eventual and inevitable recession. Otherwise, what happens when we don't handle recession? It might lead to a situation of depression, which is altogether problematic for all the economies in the world. So in such a situation, multilateralism also becomes important. From the health perspective, it is important, and from the economic perspective, it is important. But is multilateralism functioning well at the moment? No. Why is that the case? Because of the systemic inefficiencies that are there in these organizations. This article talks about the example of WTO and why it is not functioning well. It says the WTO is not functioning well because none of its important bodies are not functioning well. Like the dispute redressal panel of WTO is not doing well, and the functions of WTO are not being able to be carried out well. It is not being able to increase the trade. It is not being able to create a system of free and fair trade, and so on. Because of these reasons, WTO is not functioning well, and also there is a situation in which different countries are having a trust deficit with China, right? Even before COVID pandemic, people used to be quite skeptical of China. Why is that the case? Because they used to dump goods in those economies and earn export benefits. But at the moment, because of COVID pandemic, people are really scared and have a huge trust deficit with China. In such a situation, multilateralism has taken a fall. That is what this article says so far. Now it moves forward and talks about a solution which is India-centric. It talks about the role of India in such a situation in order to handle this particular problem of fall of multilateralism. So what is the role of India? First is that India can basically lead a coalition. It can build consensus among certain nations and it can lead a coalition in order to bridge the trust deficit with China with a set of rules. Like for example, India can help this coalition to basically frame certain rules based on which trust deficit can be bridged with China. Like for example, China, if you don't do this, I'm going to probably set up certain sanctions. Like this, if this coalition can come up with a set of rules and ask China to follow it, then this coalition will be able to trust China, right? And that kind of trust deficit can be bridged with the help of India. That is one role which is envisaged by this article for India. Also, there is a second point which this article says. This says that India could work closely with alliance of multilateralism to shape both the alliance itself and reform its agenda at large. So there is this body, a small body called the Alliance of Multilateralism. This is trying to build the concept of multilateralism on the international fora, and this body can be revamped with the help of India. That is the second point this article talks about. And thirdly, at this point of time, a lot of countries basically are trusting India because of the good way in which it is able to handle the COVID pandemic. In such a situation, India basically has an opportunity, because on one hand people trust India at this moment, and on the second hand they do not trust China, because of which all the companies which are going to be situated in China, they are trying to move elsewhere. And what other opportunities do they have? They definitely will come to India. In such a situation, India should basically catch this opportunity and boost its economy and prevent its economy from falling in an economic recession or a depression. That is what this article says. And let's move on to the next article. So the next article for our discussion has the following title: A War-like State and a Bond to the Rescue. The syllabus connection has been listed here, and the issue is related to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the dimension is to revive economy from the pandemic. This particular article is interesting because it is talking about a new kind of bond called the console bond. Now let's look at what the article says. So this article starts out by talking about the poor performance of our economy. 2 days ago or 3 days ago, if you all remember, we talked about Kerala and how its finances were basically becoming very poor. But in a manner of speaking, if we talk honestly, most states are going to this problem. All their revenues have stopped for the moment. For example, there are no tax revenues, there is no non-tax revenues, and because of this, there is no money in the hands of the government, be it the central government or the state government. So if this lockdown restrictions continue, it is going to create a situation in which the government has no money or has very less money with itself in order to go on with its whatever expenditure, be it the welfare expenditure or the capital expenditure. It does not have enough money to go on with that. In such a situation, it is really wise to look at the concept of console bond. Okay, that is what this article says. We'll take a break here and understand a brief background of what a console bond is. So what is this console bond? In 1914, what happened in 1914? We had the World War. In such a situation of World War, British government has basically launched this concept of console bond in order to raise revenues from the people. The government itself was not getting money in the form of tax revenues or otherwise, but it needed money in order to create more defense equipment, in order to take care of its people. So it needed lots of money, and to raise this money, it opened up this concept of console bond. So what is this console bond? Console bond is a bond which is basically given to people, and people will basically give money to the government in return, right? That is how a bond exchange works. You buy the bond and you give the money, and you get interest payments from time to time, and after a period of time you will get the principal. But in the concept of console bond, the principal will never be paid. In fact, what happens is the interest payments will be given to the bondholder to eternity, which is why we call it as the perpetual bond. So once people buy this perpetual bond or console bond or eternity bond, then the government basically gives out interest payments for a long period of time. In fact, it gives the interest payments for eternity. But is it wise to do so? It doesn't matter whether it is wise or not. It is really important to do so because the situation is really so bleak. The situation is really so difficult, and in order to handle the situation, the British government has launched the concept of console bond. Now let's come back to our present article. This present article talks about the importance of launching such a console bond or something like that in India, because because our economy is not doing well. The states do not have enough money, and at the moment whatever investment we are taking from people, we are asking them to invest in PM CARES fund, and that does not help for a long time. Instead of asking them to invest in PM CARES fund, they should be urged to invest in this particular concept of console bond, because they will get interest payments, right? That is what this article claims. Now this article establishes why people would want to invest in such a bond. So why would Indians want to invest in a console bond? The first reason is because there are no other important revenues. If you look at the real estate sector, it is not functioning well. If you look at the gold prices, they are basically increasing like anything. In such a situation, if I am a retail investor, what other opportunities do I have to invest my money? Literally none. So instead of investing in real estate, which is not doing well, or gold prices, which are basically very high, I will invest in console bond because it is going to give me perpetual interest payment. That is the first reason why I would want to invest in it. And secondly, most people at this moment, India is basically functioning as a single unit. All the people have a good amount of solidarity among them. Like for example, if you look at the YouTube videos, people are basically showering flowers on doctors who are basically taking care of the COVID patients. People are basically supporting the government in its efforts to handle the COVID pandemic. In such a situation, they would want to participate in the growth story of India during COVID-19. So if we launch this console bond and show people that this is an opportunity to handle the COVID-19 pandemic and also the opportunity to handle the inevitable economic recession, then people would want to come forward and invest in this particular bond because it is also an emotive issue. And thirdly, there could be an economic reason. If this console bond provides an attractive interest rate, then people would want to invest in it because the interest payments are going to be received by them perpetually. So this is what this article says. And once we may get this money from console bond, what can we use it to? We can use it for different purposes. More importantly, we could use it for personal protective equipment for doctors. In order to provide protective equipment for doctors, we can use funds from this particular bonds, console bond. Secondly, at the moment, the small and medium-sized industries are basically starving of funds and they are starving of any market for their goods, and these small and medium-sized industries or the MSME sector as such can be boosted with the help of the revenues which can be realized from the console bond. Now let's move forward to the next article. So the title for the present article is Everyone Wants a Good Stimulus. The syllabus connection has been listed here. The issue is related to COVID-19 lockdown and the dimension is good stimulus to revive the economy. So what does this article say? This article starts out by saying that the economy is not functioning well. This is what we have been learning over the past few current affairs analysis, right? The MSME sector is not functioning well. The transportation infrastructure is locked down because of which the logistics of all goods are basically stuck, and then the farmers are not able to harvest their goods. Even if they are able to harvest their goods, they are not able to go to the mandi. So whichever sector you take, be it the service sector or the industry sector or the primary sector, none of them are functioning well. So eventually this might lead to a situation of recession. So everybody, be it the media or the experts, are talking about this concept of stimulus. They are asking for different kinds of stimulus, but is it really possible to give that kind of stimulus is what this article talks about. So this article talks about the different kinds of stimulus which are being asked by the different expert agencies, and it basically dissects each of these stimulus. So the first kind of stimulus which people are expecting is the form of direct income support. Like for example, the poor people need money, so just print money and give it to people. So is this kind of stimulus helpful? As we all know, this is definitely not helpful because this is going to create a situation of inflation. This is going to create a situation in which our currency will depreciate. It will plunge, and because of this internal turmoil, there could lead to a situation in which the rating agencies will decrease our investment rating. So if there is too much of inflation in our economy because of printing currency, then the credit rating agency will decrease our rating, and because of the decrease, all the people outside or the economies outside would not want to come to India to invest. That is a problem we have. So this kind of stimulus we definitely cannot give. Now the second kind of stimulus which people are asking is basically definitely not possible because of the supply side lockdown. Like for example, let's say I give stimulus, I make sure people have more disposable income in their hand. What will people do? They are supposed to go to the market and buy their goods? Yes or no? But this is definitely not possible because markets themselves do not have goods. The markets themselves do not have goods because the transportation and the logistics sector of the government of the country is in shambles at the moment. There is no movement of goods or items from one place to another. So even if I am a retail person, if I have money in my hand because of fiscal stimulus, where will I go to and buy goods from? There are no goods outside there. So in a situation of supply side lockdown, stimulus as such will not work. You have to wait till this lockdown stops so that different goods will be able to move throughout the country, and then only stimulus is going to work. Until and unless that happens, supply side lockdown you cannot give stimulus. It is like giving push to a dead engine when the car has a flat tire. This is what this article says. And next, people are asking about a stimulus, which is all fine, but to give stimulus, where does the government get its money from? It's not just the state governments who are not doing well. Even the central government is not doing well because its revenues are hit. All its economic activity is hit. Its revenue receipts or capital receipts, whatever receipts it usually gets, it is not getting that kind of money because of COVID-19 pandemic. So as such, the central government doesn't have money. Sure, in the previous article we talked about sourcing this money through the concept of console bond, but it is basically theory. This is basically a suggestion that has been given. But at the moment, if we are talking realistically, can we say that the government has enough money to give stimulus to the people or the states? No, certainly not. So in such a situation, stimulus is not possible. Next comes the concept of new kind of stimulus, which the so-called experts are talking about. They are basically asking the government to incentivize the bank managers. We have different kinds of banks in the country. They could be private sector banks or the public sector banks. So these bank managers can be incentivized so that they will start lending to different sectors of the economy, different productive sectors of the economy, especially the MSME sector. So you could basically incentivize a particular bank manager to urge him to lend to the productive sectors of the economy. But this is definitely not going to be useful, because if this kind of lending turns into fraudulent lending, in the long run, it is going to create a problem of evergreening, NPA or the non-performing asset problem, and so on. So that kind of stimulus is not encouraged either. And next, people are basically asking us to go to the IMF and get money. Look, India does not have money. We have to go to the IMF and get some money. This is definitely not encouraged by the article. What kind of foreign exchange crisis does India have at the moment? None. If you look at 1991 and compare the situation at the moment, in 1991 we faced a severe balance of payment crisis. We did not have enough foreign exchange reserves. Whatever foreign exchange reserves we had, that was only sufficient for the next 2 weeks of sourcing our imports. So we did not have money at that point. So we went to the IMF and asked for money. But do we have that situation now? No, because India has a good amount of foreign exchange reserve. Of course, our foreign exchange reserves are not as high as that of China, but still we have a good amount of foreign exchange reserves to the tune of 420 to 450 billion dollars. Can we really go in this situation to go to IMF and ask for a conditional led loan? No, that is definitely not possible either. This is what this article says. This article talks about the different kinds of stimulus packages which different experts are asking. It dissects each of the stimulus packages. But in the end, this article says the center should basically support the states by giving the money it is supposed to give. Like for example, the center owes the states some amount of money. The GST revenues it is supposed to give to the states in the form of GST compensation amount. It is basically has not given that money to the states. The center should give this money to the states to give some kind of boost to the states in the short run. Okay, this is what this article says. It dissects the different kind of stimulus packages which are being expected by the so-called experts. Now let's move forward to the next article. The title for the present article is Hacker Sees Security Flaws in Arogya Setu. The syllabus connection has been listed here for your benefit. The issue is related to the Arogya Setu app that has been launched by the government. The dimension is related to the privacy concerns over this particular app. So this article basically talks about the problems in the Arogya Setu app and how it is basically prone to being hacked. Now before we move into the article, we will look at a brief background which is related to the Arogya Setu app. First prelims fact that we have to learn from in relation to Arogya Setu app is that it is basically launched by the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. It will basically help people in identifying the risk of getting affected by coronavirus. So if I am a person and I install this Arogya Setu app, this app will tell me the kind of risk which I have. It basically asks for certain data. How many international passengers did I meet in the last month? How much did I go out of my city in the last month? And so on. It takes information like that and it will process it with the help of artificial intelligence, with the help of other kinds of simulating models that are there, and basically tell me that the risk that I have is so and so. But there are certain problems with this particular app. Firstly, once you install this app, this app basically connects itself with the nearby devices and it does not ask you for permission regarding the same. That is one problem. And secondly, the kind of information that is being collected by the Arogya Setu app, how much can we collect and how much can we not collect? That is the problem. You are supposed to protect the privacy of the people, right? After Puttaswamy judgment, privacy is a fundamental right. So some data can never be collected from the people, and if it is being collected, it has to be collected in an utmost secure manner. But is that the case? No. So this is the first kind of problem which this Arogya Setu app basically is facing. It is collecting a lot of information, and this is not good because it is not taking an informed consent of the people involved. Now come to the highlight of this article. This article basically talks about how this app has security flaws. So there is this ethical hacker named Robert Baptist. He basically talked about the security flaws that are present in the Arogya Setu app. He has been able to hack into this Arogya Setu app and he looked into the information of the people who are not well. In fact, he gave the examples of how 5 people in the Prime Minister's office and 2 people in the army headquarters who are not feeling well, and this kind of information he is not supposed to have, right? But he has this information because he has been able to hack into this Arogya Setu app. Now this could create a lot of problem for us because the amount of information that is being collected by this Arogya Setu app is humongous, and if such a system which has a lot of data is prone to being hacked, it could create a situation in which private data of a lot of people could come out in the open, and this definitely is not good for our people or for the government. So we are supposed to revamp the app or decrease the amount of information that will be collected by this particular app. So that is the gist of this article. Now let's move on to the next article. So the title for the present article is European Economy Faces Historic Recession. The syllabus connection has been listed here for your benefit. The issue is related to the COVID-19 pandemic and the dimension is effect of pandemic on our world economy, Now let's move on to look into the gist of the article. So this article doesn't have much information that is relevant, but it is important to notice that the European economy is going to face a historic recession. They have not faced a very big recession or a depression in the last 2 or 3 decades like that they are going to face now. Never before, never after type of situation is basically arising because of this COVID-19 pandemic. As we all know, the number of people who have been affected in European countries, especially in Spain, Italy and so on, the number of people dying there is very large. In such a situation, the economic activity has not been able to continue. It will not be reviving for quite some time starting from now, because of which European economy will face a devastating recession in the time to come. And at this moment, the governments in the European economy are trying to basically balance 2 things. On one side, they are basically trying to lift the restrictions in order to boost the economic activity, and on the other side, they are trying to make sure that they will not be hit by another wave of virus pandemic. So these 2 delicate problems they are trying to balance is what this article says, and let's see what happens in times to come. Let's move forward to the next article. So the title for the present article is Poor Find Access to Accounts Hard, says this study. The syllabus connection has been listed here. The issue is related to the relief packages during the lockdown, and the dimension is related to the implementation challenges involved in these relief measures. So as a part of our solution to handle the COVID pandemic, the government has been coming up with different kinds of measures or relief schemes to support people. But this support scheme, how far is it functioning well, is what this article is trying to talk about. A survey has been done in Uttar Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Gujarat and so on. So a group of students and volunteers who were basically guided by an economist, a development economist, they went there and conducted the survey regarding the reach of the different relief schemes that the government has given. Like for example, there are several schemes that are functioning now. Some of them are COVID-19 relief scheme, the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, the Jan Dhan Bank account and so on. So the functioning of these schemes is what has been assessed by this group of student volunteers. Now we will look at the survey results. The survey showed that only 1/3 of the households, only 1/3 of the households have been able to go to the bank in the past month. They could not go out of their houses because of the lockdown and the banks were shut down because of lockdown restrictions. So only 1/3 of the people have been able to go to the bank. So even among those people who have been able to go to the bank, only 70 to 80% were able to successfully withdraw the cash. So if this metric is basically taken as a yardstick, it says that a lot of people have not been able to access their bank accounts. If they are not able to access their bank accounts, how will they get the money that the government has given them? So that is one problem. And secondly, only 23% of the people who have been surveyed have said that they have received a notification or an SMS regarding the money that has been put in their accounts. Like for example, under the Jan Dhan account, some amount of money is put in the bank accounts of the people, right? But when this money is being put in their accounts, they are also supposed to receive an SMS notification regarding the money that is being put in. But this SMS notification has been received by as few as only 23%. Now, you think for yourself, if you don't even get the notification about the money that has been put in your bank, how will you know whether to go and get the money? How will you know whether to go and withdraw the money or not? So that is another problem. So this is another problem that has been listed out by this particular survey. So is everything so bad in terms of the relief schemes and their functioning? Definitely not. There is this particular food grain scheme which is basically functioning well. The government, including the center and the states, is trying to provide subsidized and free food and subsidized food to the people and across the nook and corner of the country. This particular scheme has functioned really well. All those people who were the eligible beneficiaries under this scheme, most of them have been able to get the food in the last month, and that is the bright side of this relief scheme. So this is what this article says. If you look at the relief schemes that have been there, that are in place in order to handle the situation better and in order to support the people, some of them, as in most of them, are not functioning well, but the food grain scheme is functioning really well. Now let's move forward to the next article. So the title for the present article is RSS pitches for Swadeshi model of development. The syllabus connection has been listed here for your benefit. Please have a look. The issue is related to the developmental models and the dimension is the concept of Swadeshi model of development. So this article basically talks about the concept of Swadeshi model of development. Historically, if you look at the kind of developmental models we had in the world, either we had capitalism or the global capitalism in the USA led bloc, or we had global communism, which was basically led by Russia, former USSR and China and so on. So these are the only two models which we have had so far. But this particular organization of RSS is basically claiming the importance of a Swadeshi model of development. Don't take the name of RSS when you write a mains answer, by the way. It might not bode well with the examiner, but you can definitely use this rich concept of Swadeshi model of development as an alternative to the capitalism and the communistic models that we have seen in the history as such. So what is this Swadeshi model of development? This Swadeshi model of development can be traced to Mr. Gandhi, that is Mahatma Gandhi, and he has talked about a Swadeshi model of development in which people produce their goods using local resources, local workforce, and all these local elements are basically integrated into the economic activity, so that we will be able to boost more economies of the local areas, especially the villages, towns, mandals and so on, and this will lead to a richness and creation of wealth in the states, and this will in turn create richness or wealth in the economy as such. So integration of local resources and workforce into the economic activity has to be done. This is the Swadeshi model of development. And another angle of the Swadeshi model of development is to take into account the ecological consideration. So whatever production you do, you have to take into account the kind of ecological limitations that we have. We are not supposed to hurt the ecology as such. If we are trying to create a good, we cannot use too much water, or we cannot pollute water. You cannot pollute the air, or you cannot pollute the land or soil that you are using. You can use these resources to create your product, whichever it may be, but you cannot pollute them to a very huge extent. You have to maintain the ecological sanctity of the ecology around you. So this is the basic concept of Swadeshi model. That is all this article basically talks about. So it can be used in your mains answer as an alternative to the global capitalism and the global communism, and this could add value to your answer. Now let's move on to the next article. So the title for the present article is Pigs Die of Suspected Hog Cholera in Meghalaya. The prelims and mains syllabus connection has been listed here. The issue is related to wildlife diseases and the dimension is related to hog cholera. So what does this article say? This article talks about this new kind of cholera called the classical swine fever, also called as hog cholera. Some amount of background is required for this article to move forward and look into the highlights. So what is this classical swine fever? It is basically known as hog cholera, and it is a contagious viral disease, and it is related to domestic and wild pigs or swine. Pigs are also known as swine, by the way. So is the disease contagious? Yes. Is it a bacterial disease or a viral disease? It is a viral disease. These two important facts are relevant for your prelims. But unlike swine flu, which also infects humans, this particular classical swine fever is a viral disease that affects only pigs. So swine flu as such affects pigs and also humans, but this hog cholera affects only the pigs, and it can be controlled by proper vaccination of your pigs. So whoever is basically herding pigs and taking care of pigs for their meat and for all kinds of resources they give, they are basically supposed to vaccinate their pigs in order to make sure that they do not fall victim for this hog cholera. African swine fever is another kind of swine fever. So this is the background related to the hog cholera. Now we will look into the highlights of this particular article. So about a dozen pigs have been killed in certain districts of Meghalaya, and people are basically suspecting that this is a case of hog cholera. And if that is the case of hog cholera, it is going to spread in leaps and bounds in the times to come, and this is basically scaring the people over there. In fact, the Khasi Jaintia Pig Association has said that it was really worried about the possibility of this hog cholera spreading. And why are people thinking that this is hog cholera? Because there is an event in Assam. In Assam, about 2,900 pigs have died due to African swine fever, which is basically another kind of this hog cholera, and people are suspecting that the deaths of the pigs in Meghalaya at this instant is probably because of an offshoot of this hog cholera. So people are suspecting this and they are really scared. So the government of Meghalaya has basically formed a high-level committee, especially in the affected districts, in order to handle the situation, in order to come up with recommendations to prevent the spread of this hog cholera if it is the case of hog cholera. And the government has basically passed an instruction saying that people cannot dispose the carcasses of these hogs in rivers. So what happens when you dispose them in rivers? These will basically pollute the river, and they probably will contaminate the people who consume, the animals who consume this kind of polluted water. So you definitely cannot dispose your carcasses in rivers, is what the government has said. So that is the gist of this article. Now let's move forward and solve some prelims questions. So here are the prelims questions for the day. Consider the following statements about the provisions of Model Tenancy Act. The Act provides for penalization of tenants who refuse to vacate after the agreed period. This is definitely right. And the second statement says it provides for landlords not to deny the basic facilities even in the time of crisis. So this is also right. So both the statements are right. Now we will look at whether the question is asking for correct statements or incorrect statements. It is asking for correct statements, so the answer is both 1 and 2. Now comes the second question. Which among the following is a bond that yields eternal interest, or we can say the concept of perpetual interest, which we just talked about in a discussion? What was it? It was basically a console bond. Anyway, we will move forward and read that yields eternal interest but not redeemable, and which is put into application in scenarios where there are very few safe entities to invest. So the answer should be console bonds, and we have option D here. So we've solved both the questions. So that is the discussion for the day. Thank you for your participation. We'll meet again.